Welcome to Uncommon Knowledge. I'm Peter Robinson. James Piereson is the director of the Manhattan Institute Center for the American University and president of the William E. Simon Foundation. A former political science professor, Jim's latest book is Camelot and the Cultural Revolution: How the Assassination of John F. Kennedy Shattered American Liberalism. Jim, welcome to Uncommon Knowledge.
Happy to be here, Peter. Thank you.
A Tale of Two Liberalisms. I quote you to yourself from the first page of the first chapter of the book. Quote, as the 1960s began, liberalism was without doubt the single most creative and vital force in American politics. This is written by a man who's dedicated, as far as I know, nearly all his professional endeavors to the advancement of conservatism in America. By the end of the decade, to continue the quotation, however, liberal doctrine was in disarray, with many of its central assumptions broken by the experience of the preceding years. It is still trying to recover. How was the liberalism of 1960 different from the liberalism of the decade later, 1970?
Peter, I meant by that in 1960, when John F. Kennedy came into office, liberalism inherited a great deal of momentum from FDR and the New Deal. They believed that the future was working in the direction of more programs and an agenda that had been established by the New Deal with federal intervention in the economy designed to protect our to perfect our democracy. The New Deal liberals were optimistic about the future.
With reason. As far as they understood it, they had beat the Great Depression, beat Adolf Hitler, reignited the economy of the 1950s, and elected John F. Kennedy.
Absolutely true. They had a record of achievement at their backs that they thought they could project into the future. There's great faith in the ability of the federal government to do many of these things because, of course, they had, as you said, led us out of the Depression, defeated Adolf Hitler, invented the atomic bomb in the 1950s, confronted the Soviet Union, built a federal highway system. We're in the process of sending men into space. There was nothing we couldn't accomplish.
You make this sound pretty good, Jim, my fellow conservative.
Yes, indeed.
In 1960, let me point out, John F. Kennedy ran to the right of Richard Nixon on defense. And not long after he was elected, he set to work on and enacted before his death a massive income tax cut.
Yeah.
In 1960, would you have voted for John Kennedy over Richard Nixon?
Well, I was in school at the time, and I remember my parents were very much for Kennedy, and I probably would have voted for Kennedy. You know, a lot of conservatives look back on Kennedy and say that
pretty good.
His views in 1960 are not all that far from their views today.
All right.
But let me just continue the thought. But the liberalism that came out of the New Deal was a very optimistic liberalism about the future and about America's role in the world and the role of the federal government in perfecting our democracy. Kennedy constantly talked about the future, and the future was going to be brighter than the past. What happened in the 1960s was that assumption of American progress among liberals was shattered. The belief in American benevolence, of America's role in the world, of the American past, all these were called into question by the liberals in the 1960s.
Two quotations. John Fitzgerald Kennedy, 1961, quote, "Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, in order to assure the survival and success of liberty." Close quote. President James Earl Carter, 1977. For too many years, we've been willing to adopt the flawed and erroneous principles and tactics of our adversaries, but we are now finally free of that inordinate fear of communism, which once led us to embrace any dictator who joined us in that fear. Close quote. Now, the usual explanation for this sea change, you can just hear it in tone, apart from one is confident. One is the sound of a trumpet, and the other is, at best, a woodwind, I think. The Cultural Revolution of the 60s, the war in Vietnam. Your explanation is?
Well, I suggest that the assassination of President Kennedy and the way it was interpreted by liberals in American life played a great role in the unwinding of liberalism in the 1960s,
All right.
and in marking that change from JFK to James Earl Carter.